Hey everyone, welcome to Perfect Pitch Live. I'm your host, Nicole Rodriguez, also CEO and founder of NRPR GROUP. For those of you guys who are just joining us for the first time, or for those of you who like reminders, Perfect Pitch Live is actually a spin-off from Perfect Pitch, which is our podcast show that's been around a little over 2 years now. Proud of us. But in this show, I will interview great members of the media, or great PR people, so that those of you out there who want to know a little bit about our world, live in our world and want to be better, or just take away best practices, this show was created for that, as our way of giving back and teaching every up-and-comer in PR, media, all of that, so that everyone can work together harmoniously and more productively. So today I'm always excited about our guests, but today I'm really excited about this guest. Because, well, I'm not going to tell you what we're doing, but we're working on something very, very special and awesome. And I'm thankful for Jonathan, who is just an amazing part of my life. And I'm very glad that he's here. So
nice to say.
Yeah, so Jonathan Small, I'm going to let him brag about himself, but first I'm going to start.
Okay.
So he's an award-winning writer. And he's obviously based here in LA. He is the founder of Write About Now, which is a little bit of a consulting firm, right, for writers, journalists, celebrities, you name it. Also, you write books for people.
I write a lot of articles. I write books for people. Yes.
Right, and it's also a podcast, right? So for those of you guys who want to tune in, we're going to let him plug that in a little bit. But Jonathan, why don't you go into a little bit of your writing background as a journalist, as a ghostwriter, all of that stuff, and let us know how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. This is super fun.
Of course.
So I began my career in New York in the 90s when magazines were still a thing that people read. Like there were actually, people actually had magazines. And I was an editor at a lot of different magazines. Glamour magazine, where I was Jake. If anybody used to
Ask
read
Jake.
Ask Jake.
He's going to give us relationship advice today.
Yes. I worked at Stuff Magazine as the executive editor, which was sort of like Maxim Magazine. I worked at Fitness Magazine. I worked at Child Magazine. So I worked at a lot of different magazines, always on the editorial side. But the little secret about magazines is that a lot of the editors on the sort of, they moonlight as writers, right? So I would, on my off time, write articles for all the magazines that either I was working for or places where I had friends. So for a while, I was writing a lot of stories about relationships. That was like my beat. So I was writing a lot for Cosmo, and I was always like the guy expert, basically.
The guy whisperer?
Yeah, the guy whisperer, which was kind of ridiculous since, I have no expertise or no PhD. But I'm a guy, and I would date
Write like a dude.
Right, I can write like a dude. So I wrote for Cosmo. I was their guy guru for a while. So that's kind of where I started my writing career. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and the industry was changing. It was becoming very digital. And I took a job at a place called Break Media. And a lot of people have probably heard of Break.com. It's sort of like a precursor to YouTube. It was where like people were falling off of skateboards. And it was those kinds of videos. And it was very popular. And I was charged with creating a bunch of websites that would sort of be in that same demographic for men, 25 to 40. And so I created websites such as Screen Junkies, which is still around.
Oh, I know Screen Junkies. That's awesome.
Which has been a little bit controversial lately. It's been a little bit in the news for not good reasons, just because they had a employee who was a Harvey Weinstein type of person, which was terrible. We don't like him. But also Caged Potato, which was a mixed martial arts website.
Oh, Caged Potato, that's really cool.
It was kind of cool. Another one called Made Man, which was a men's lifestyle. So I did all that and got really into that, and then got really into digital video. So from digital video, one of the things about my career is I always will be a writer first and foremost. But the industry was calling for different types of things, so I actually pivoted and became a digital video producer, and worked for the Game Show Network as their head of digital content. I worked for a network YouTube channel called Dance On, which was like breakdancing, and it was owned by Madonna, this YouTube channel, and I was their head of content. So I've done a little bit of both. And now I'm back to writing again, full time. And like you said, I write a lot of articles. I write for the New York Times. I've written numerous articles for Entrepreneur Magazine, for Good Housekeeping, for a bunch of others. And I'm also consulting as a writing coach.
Yeah.
So I like to help people like yourself and others tell their stories in interesting ways. Yeah,
I love it. Jonathan is amazing. So, I mean, that's an amazing background, very extensive. I think, like PR people are also seeing, we're being forced to evolve. I think that if you're still trying to do PR in the way that you did back in the 90s or even early 2000s, you're considered a dinosaur.
exactly.
With the introduction of digital media, social media, all of these places where you can create content and connect with your audiences, it all comes down to communication. And if you don't know how to communicate clearly, and you don't know how to communicate with people as people, you're going to find, as a business, as a PR person, whatever, you're going to stumble.
Yeah.
And I think that, this leads me to, ask, in terms of how PR people, you've been working with or whatever, are you finding that there are a lot who are still either approaching things in very old school ways, pitching you in very old school ways? We hear that the blast is still a thing, and I'm like, stop it. I had a funny story about that literally this morning, like having to advise a client. They're like, well, we want to do this, and we put out a press release last week, but can we just blast it again? Don't blast it ever. Ever, never
blast.
Ever blast. Because they literally just became a client just over the weekend. And yes, and so, they're like, oh, we tried to do it on our own, now we know we need an expert. Got it, okay. Now, here, what we're thinking is, since not that many people covered it last week, why don't we just blast it again? I was like, the problem in the first place was that you blasted it last week.
Just say no to blast.
Yeah, it's just, media don't like it. It's, you don't even...
Well, it's impersonal, and it's not targeted, and I think one of the things that you and I talked about that was so sharp that you said is that, when you pitch a publication or a journalist, you know what you're pitching, you know what they're looking for, and you know the sections of maybe the magazine or the website that the story might live on.
Yeah.
And when I just kind of get blind pitches that are sort of like, oh, you should write about this person because you wrote about, I get a lot of pitches right now for entrepreneurs, since I've been writing a lot for entrepreneurs. So I get a lot of people pitching their sort of different clients, but entrepreneurs are very specific what they're looking for, and if you spend a little bit of time with a website, you'll sort of see that they're not really looking for venture capitalists or stories of profiles of like Richard Branson. They want stories, inspiring stories of people like bootstrapping it, who made it to rose from the bottom, and so a story that I wrote recently for them was about this Shark Tank winner who was basically cleaning bathrooms in LA 5 years ago.
That's awesome.
He was from the Dominican Republic, living the American dream, and in cleaning these bathrooms in these gyms, he had this idea to create locks, combination locks, because we always know that we forget our combination, right?
I forget.
Yeah, all the time.
I forget people's phone numbers.
And it was a combination lock that did a thumbprint thing, just like the way your phone does. It would unlock with your thumbprint. Okay. But it also had a key, in case you forgot, in case it didn't work with your thumbprint. So it was a brilliant idea, and that was the perfect entrepreneur story, because it was sort of like, how did this guy, rise from where he was to where he is, and how ingenuity and how hard work and believing in yourself and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of story they're looking for. They're not looking for somebody who was like a Stanford graduate who had all this stuff going on and then got a startup going. So. Anyway, so I get a lot of pitches that are a little bit of that variety, and that's kind of like, well, you just haven't really looked at entrepreneurs. So that it doesn't bum me out, but it's kind of like, no, thank you, and then I might not get back to them.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's a big lesson to learn. I think, again, as an agency owner, it is my responsibility to teach my team, the best practices, right? Teach them the right ways, whether they stay at NRPR, they go somewhere else. I'm hoping that I can plant the right seeds so that PR people are, I think, looked at with a little more respect.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes, because of the people who are doing it in either the lazy ways or trying to just, cut corners, they think that all PR people are like that.
Yeah.
And I can't stand that stigma. It hurts, because I look at what I do as an art.
Yeah.
When done correctly, PR can be effective, and to me, it's my art.
Yeah.
Right? And so teaching people that it takes 2 seconds to just get lost in Entrepreneur Magazine for a minute.
Yeah, it's really
Read,
not that
get
hard.
inspired, have fun. And I always tell everyone, if you can get 20 solid pitches out a day, solid, versus 200 or a 2,000 blast, you're winning on the 20.
Right.
Because more often than not, even if it's a no, it's going to be a, hey, thanks for trying. I clearly see that you're aligning with what I'm sort of doing. This might not work for right now, but it opens the conversation for something deeper, maybe to even go back and ask a question like, okay, if this doesn't work, is there anything I can do for, to make it work? It opens up that line.
And I think another important thing is don't make the person on the other end of the email work too hard. Like, I'll sometimes get emails that are like really long, and it's like, you're busy just like I am. We're busy. Like, what is the story? What is the, maybe pitch it to me, like, give me the headline, give me just the 3 facts that I need to know about this particular topic, and let me decide based on that.
Based on clear
information. Don't make me work too hard. Sometimes they'll attach like big bios, and I just don't have time. I'm just like, yeah, exactly. You're like, whoa.
Please do not.
And look, it's a total love-hate relationship between journalists. I have more love on my end between journalists and PR person.
That's why we
but it's sort of like we need you because you are feeding us information that we wouldn't normally otherwise know about, especially when you're giving us stuff that isn't even in the news. So there's really no way that we would know about it unless you told us about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of you, and there's sometimes more of you than there are of us.
Yeah.
And so if you can just help us a little bit, really tailoring it to the specific person you're pitching, I think you're totally right. It makes more sense to do 20 than 2,000.
Yeah.
It's just
it's
smarter.
Because it's smarter, and it's not like, I always say, a monkey could send a blast. That's why they call it MailChimp.
It's true.
It's a monkey. It's just like
it's a little monkey in a
cut,
weird
paste,
hat.
and program it to put someone else's name on there. No, don't do that. If you have a base that works, right? I do believe in saving yourself some time. If you have a base about the story or maybe the key points, up front always needs to be tailored. Jonathan, I love your podcast right about now. I actually listened to 3 of your guests or whatever. But here's something that I learned about your writing with Entrepreneur. I read the story about the guy who scrubbed the toilets and blah, blah, blah. Now I actually have this person who, I don't know, has one arm and is a freaking major, opened a construction company and now builds homes with one arm. I mean, maybe that happens. I don't know. If I did, I know who I'm giving it to.
That story,
But that's it's putting that together to be really just thoughtful and just smart.
Yeah.
Smart about it.
Yeah.
So that's really good advice. And again, I always hope that people are listening and taking notes because I found out that there's one journalist who said she gets 2,000 emails a day.
Oh my God.
2,000, and I'm complaining about 300 to 500 a day that I'm like,
there's no way.
But 2,000? And she said most of them are just blasts. And she said she's a national television news producer.
Right.
So she's getting half of those at least have to be just blast mindless emails.
And she will delete if she doesn't know you. I think that's why you're so good with relationships. Like having a relationship with your writers, and if I have a relationship with a publicist, I'm gonna open her email
first,
or his email.
Yeah.
So first, So it's so important to have that relationship.
Mm-hmm. And be the type of person who knows how to foster relationships. I think with anything, it's going to them and saying, I might not have anything for you with regards to my clients. Is there anything that you're working on that I can go maybe tap into my network to maybe help you with?
Right.
That's how you can help a journalist. Look at yourself as being a resource for them because it's not always about you. It's not always about your client. It's about the relationship in general. So if you look at yourself in that way, then journalists are going to come to you proactively. And then it's like, okay, this is great. Now I can maybe slot my client in because this makes sense. But it becomes a give and take, and you're not operating in a me, or a robotic way where it's like, I have this thing for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think, again, if you're the type of person in PR who you don't have a friendly personality, you don't like working with people, it
might not be the best job for you.
Don't get into PR. I've met some of you. I've met some of you. Stop it. Get out of our profession and go do something else. Yeah. Because then it's then they just become
as a train conductor on a Manhattan subway or something. If you're just confrontational.
Relationships with media. Anyway, it happens. So, and I think I'm genuinely friendly and want to be helpful. I think that's what's helped.
Yeah, you're friendly and you want to make your people look good too.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
like that. You're incentivized by that. You want the journalist to write a great story. I mean, we need you just as much as you need us. We need to fill pages. We have a lot of content we need to create.
Yeah. What is some advice that you would give if someone is just writing a pitch and I don't know, you look at your inbox and you open up an email. What do you want to see in terms of like the picture of the email?
Yeah. I like to see, in the subject headline something, something that kind of grabs me with the lapels, like, amazing story of, immigrant cleaning bathroom, something that, like the headline right there. So I'm right there.
Bathrooms.
Immigrant cleaning bathrooms who's now got $500,000. Yeah, that's a big one. I like that. Again, I like simplicity. I like the feeling that it's not a spam mail, that it's personalized. Maybe say like, entrepreneur pitch or something, so it's like very specific who you're pitching, and I don't only get pitched for entrepreneur, I get pitched for, I'd like to get more pitches for right about now, that would be awesome, but I get pitched.
Well, I got you one. Jerry Knack, if you're watching on Facebook, get ready to be on that show. And
we'll talk about what I'm looking for, and I've been getting some great people, but right now it's just my own connections, I'm only 9 episodes in, though.
It's fine, it's a build. It's gonna be great, Jonathan.
Yeah. So, I hope that helps. Yeah. So just being very tailored, very specific. If there are interesting, compelling images, I would definitely include those so that I can have a sense visually of something.
Yep.
But yeah, that is
no attachments, right?
Attachments are bad. Oh, one also I was thinking as you were speaking that the classic is that for your gift guide, you always get this email about sending for your gift guide. First of all, gift guide is such an old school thing. But it's like, that's such a lazy, do you even know if we have a gift guide? Like
1999 called, they want their term back.
They want their gift guide. So anyway,
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Well, that is very good advice, and I think now we're getting into the part where we are going to take questions from our, our fans out there in the social media world. This one, we know this fan, Delia in La La Land. So she's awesome.
Great name.
Yeah, we love Delia. So, Jonathan, what is your favorite part about being a ghostwriter?
Oh, being a ghostwriter. So ghostwriting is awesome because it channels a lot of things that I love to. I love interviewing interesting people. So it really starts off with really getting to know. It's almost like you become like their therapist. Like you just talk to them and you listen and you listen and you listen and you roll tape. So I love sort of finding these really interesting people who aren't necessarily professional storytellers and haven't been trained as journalists, like writers, as I have over the years, and making their amazing stories come to life. Like you sit down with them, you get to know them really well, and then you sort of parse together all the different interesting things about them and figure out, like, how is this going to be an interesting narrative? How is this going to be an interesting story? So I love that. I love telling stories. I always loved telling stories as a kid. I like telling stories as a grown-up, and just helping really, if you find a partner like you, well, not that we're, whatever, but if you, somebody who has an interesting
partner in crime,
partner in crime, interesting stories to tell, that's a great thing.
Yeah, and that's your art.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and I always tell people, I'm like, the drawing type of art, forget it. Like, literally, my high school teacher was like, Nicole, you might want to not be in my class.
That one, my daughter is good at that. I'll stick with
I was
writing.
like, all right, I'll go take dance.
Yeah.
That'll be my art for right now. But yeah, no, and PR is my art, but I think it's definitely a beautiful art form, writing. So another question from Diego Alcala. What's up, Diego? So, do you ever get writer's block? And if so, how do you overcome it?
Of course I get writer's block. I get writer's lazy. I get writer's procrastination, which is more, I just don't want to start writing because writing is so hard. And I find that most writer's block comes from just not wanting to actually start doing it, because once you're writing, most people are just in a flow, right?
Yeah.
But it's starting writing that is so challenging. So what I have done and what I've learned over the years is it's called morning pages, and it came from this book called The Artist's Way, which is by Julia Cameron. And basically what morning pages is like, you take a pencil or a pen and you write longhand, just anything that comes to your head.
Yep.
And it has to be in longhand. You can't type it, right?
Yep.
And you just just write. Like I can't think of anything to write. Oh my God, this is the worst day. I'm not. And by doing that, you're sort of unlocking like an unconscious sort of writing, and you're already writing. You're writing without judging, and I find that to be really helpful to sort of like start the day doing that. You're just because you've already written now, and now you're already kind of in the writing mode, and it just kind of clears the cobwebs of your subconscious, whatever. And so that has been something that's really helped me. I mean, the sort of other obvious thing is just write. Like just write without judgment. Just keep writing. That was one of the lessons I learned early on. Just like try to write without editing yourself, and just keep going. And eventually you'll kind of get into a flow. And listen, the thing you might write that morning might be terrible, but at least you kind of got yourself started.
No, and that's definitely. I mean, the same thing with PR. A lot of what we do is writing. Oftentimes we have to imagine what a potential story might look like before the journalist writes it, so that we know how to describe what the opportunity might be for them. And then obviously the journalist is going to take it, make it theirs, and add to whatever. But if we can't write clearly, and we can't put together like a very nice pitch that is like, here's what I think the opportunity might be for you. We can line this up for you. We can do that. It's all, and sometimes it's like, where do I start? How do I don't, and you just have to start getting into it. And it's a lot faster for me now than it was earlier in my career, because I would just have like pitch writing block where it's like, well, where do I?
Like what's the lead?
And then you overthink it, and then you have to edit yourself 1,000 times. But I totally get it. And for me, what I tell my team, because there's a lot of writing and editing I have to do still for my clients, whether we're writing thought leadership pieces, good press releases, solid messaging. There are times when your brain just doesn't work. I'm like, my brain's just not working. Like, guys, I either need to take a nap because I'm 100 years old, or I need to literally just go to sleep for the day and wake up with a fresh brain. And oftentimes I wake up with a fresh brain and I'm just like, I'll just get right into it, because your brain does get tired.
Or go to sleep on it. Maybe think about it as you go to sleep and then wake up. With that.
Just don't keep doing that until like make sure you actually wake up. Right. But I've found that there are just days where I'm like, you guys are going to get nothing from me in this block of time. I think I need to take a nap and wake up and try this again. So anyway, very good. So before we go on to our last question, because we only have a couple minutes left, where can people find you and connect with you online, listen to your podcast, and all that stuff?
All right. So I have a new podcast, and I'm really excited about it. It's called Right About Now.
W-R-I-T.
Yes, W-R-I-T. See what I did there? I've even written the theme song, which I'm proud of.
I want to hear it.
It's cool. And so what I do is I interview successful writers about sort of how to sell and how to tell stories. And so far I've had on, I just went on a New York tour and I interviewed a bunch of people, but I interviewed the editor-in-chief of Real Simple Magazine, Leslie Yazel, about kind of what they look for. I've interviewed Max Brooks, who wrote World War Z and the Zombie Survival Guide. I've interviewed Taffy Brodesser-Akner, who's a big culture writer for the New York Times. I just posted an interview with her. So if you're interested, if you're an aspiring writer, or even if you are a professional writer who just likes to hear interesting stories of how writers kind of got into the game and how they've been successful and how they approach things like writer's block, it might be a good listen for you.
It would definitely be a good listen.
Good. I'm really enjoying it.
That's awesome. Good. That's your way of giving back too, and inspiring other writers, right? Like young writers. Where shout out to the kiddo that I met. What was it, last week? At the Ed Talk, who is an aspiring automotive journalist, was like, well, I don't know if I should do it. My parents told me that there's not a lot of money in being a journalist, and I'm like, poor thing. Like, go follow your dream and become a journalist, and the money will show up.
For sure.
Right, we gotta motivate young writers. So final question, if we can fit it in. You have your own podcast.
Yes.
But which do you prefer more? Hosting your own or being a guest on others, and why?
Well, this is my first being a guest on, and I'm really enjoying it. So it's going to be a tough call.
Right. Because you've had so much fun today.
I've had so much fun. They're so different. I mean, it is fun to not have to worry about all the sort of things that go into making a podcast,
Yeah,
like
the
programming, the questions. I do everything myself right now with Right About Now.
Shout out to Katie.
Yeah, Katie's behind the scenes. She is
this is like my
you
right
come
arm
in, the
without
coffee's
Katie.
ready.
It's
I
like,
like that.
We love Katie.
It is nice to I like obviously having my own thing. Right About Now is really like a real extension of like sort of who I am and what I believe in and stuff. So to me, it's been really freeing that way, because for a lot of my career, I've done kind of what other people have asked me to do.
Right.
And it's nice to have sort of your own thing where you're
like Janet Jackson, he's in control.
I'm in control. Yep.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
That is awesome. All right, well, I don't know how much time. I think that's a wrap. I think literally right in time.
Right.
So, Jonathan, I am so thankful that you came to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
You're awesome.
for sure.
I love what you do.
Well, good. This is our way of giving back, sharing our gifts with everyone. Hope you guys all enjoyed today's episode. We'll be back again next month with another episode of Perfect Pitch Live. And next week we'll have, next week is Thanksgiving. So we will not have a new episode of Perfect Pitch. We'll be eating turkey with our families, and we'll probably just have a rerun. But the week after that, tune in to Perfect Pitch. Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.